West Memphis 3 has always been a case that was dear to me, and through a lot of digging, I would like to share what I have found about the true murderers that killed those boys. In 2011, the West Memphis 3 signed an Alford plea, and they were allowed to leave prison, and we all thought the case was over, until two men came forward. Two men whose stories matched, Benny Guy and Billy Stewart. The documents I have are extremely long, and I'm going to highlight some of them so you can see what I'm talking about. The story that Benny and Billy both say is corroborated by the autopsies. In May of 2015, Billy Wayne Stewart signed this affidavit. He met Terry Hobbs through a mutual friend, Roy Taylor. Billy and Roy and Benny, they all sold drugs, and they all ran in the same group. Billy learned through Roy Taylor that Mr. Hobbs was bisexual. This is very important for later. On May 5th, Mr. Hobbs arrived at my home. At this time, Benny Guy was lying underneath my stock car working on it from below. I looked across the top of my stock car to see Mr. Hobbs in his pickup truck with a man. They were kissing. With them was also Buddy Lucas and LG Hollingsworth, who were exiting the vehicle. They purchased the drugs and they left. For some reason, after that day, he no longer wanted to come to his house anymore to buy the drugs, so he asked him to be delivered. Immediately prior to the delivery, my son noticed and pointed out to me that Mr. Hobbs was kissing a man. This was the same man that I saw Mr. Hobbs kissing on May 5th, 1993. Within a week of that delivery, I also delivered things to Mr. Hobbs in Memphis, Tennessee, at a gay bar. Upon the delivery, I saw Mr. Hobbs holding hands with the same man who was at my house on May 5th, 1993. The first time that he came upon this story in 94, Roy Taylor asked if he had seen Mr. Hobbs recently. He asked why. He said that Mr. Hobbs had told him that he had something to do with the murders that night. At that point, Benny Guy tells him that Buddy Lucas confessed, so he had a conversation with Buddy Lucas, and this is what happened. Buddy stated that Hobbs had picked up him and LG from the trailer park and wanted to go pick up some drugs. At this point, Buddy begins to describe what went on that night. In Buddy's version, Hobbs had seen the boys spying on them and took off after them and hurt them. There was much more detail put in, which I will tell you later, from LG. Buddy says that they found the boys, and when they found the boys, that Mr. Hobbs walked over to the one and began beating him and bit the nether regions. At that point, he also cut them. They had beaten the boys very badly and eventually had thrown everything into the creek. Billy Stewart signed that document on May of 15. Here's where more details come in. Benny Guy also signed an affidavit from when he was incarcerated with LG in a jail cell, and LG told him almost the exact same story that Buddy had told Billy. There's a lot of people in this. Much like Buddy's story, LG's started with the same thing. They went to go get some drugs. They got the drugs. They drove around. But there was more detail in this story. As stated before, Hobbs and his friend wanted the boys to wrestle. And they stopped. They had more drugs. And then, again, they were being spied on. And Hobbs yelled, "You better get them. You got to catch them. Get them. Hurry and get them." They took off running after the boys. When they caught them and they got back to Terry Hobbs, he demanded for them to be caught. LG told me that as soon as they brought the kids to Terry, that one of them kicked him. Hobbs snapped and hit the boy with severe force in the head 2 or 3 times. After the first few blows, he stopped long enough to say, "I'm going to teach your little fucking ass." And then he went into a rage, beating him over and over. And then, after the kids were beaten until they could not stand, Mr. Hobbs made LG and Buddy take their pants off. After that, the boys were undressed, and they told them to hold him down. And at that point, he cut the nether regions. After cutting the boy, they told them to toss the bodies in the ditch of water. Now, Here's the autopsies. The autopsies are very lengthy, but I'm just going to point some things out here. Steve Branch died of multiple injuries with drowning. They had been beaten and thrown in and drowned. Michael Moore died of multiple injuries with drowning. He'd been beaten and thrown into the creek to drown. However, the first boy had simply died of multiple injuries. They stated that one of the boys was beaten absolutely to death and that they had to get rid of the other two. The autopsies absolutely back up the witnesses' stories of one of the boys being beaten literally to death and then them getting rid of the other two boys. In 2007, a hair was tested for DNA, and Terry Hobbs and his friend could not be discluded. Terry Hobbs had a friend with him that night, according to Buddy and LG. And though it doesn't say it in here, it was David Jacoby. 2 eyewitness statements from people who were there, whose stories completely match. And they match the evidence of the autopsies. Terry Hobbs, David Jacoby, LG Hollingsworth, and Buddy Lucas are the ones who took that boy's life. Allegedly.